They stay close because you gave them a version of love that didn't wound, one that didn't demand they shrink, didn't punish them for being human, didn't ask them to trade pieces of themselves just to be held. You offered them something so few people ever truly experience, love that didn't burn them down just to prove it was real. Love that didn't come with sharp edges disguised as passion. Love that didn't make them doubt their worth, question their sanity, or brace themselves for the next emotional blow. You became the quiet corner of the world where they could finally exhale, and that kind of safety becomes unforgettable. You didn't ask for worship. You didn't ask for perfection. You didn't ask for them to perform a role or wear a mask. Instead, you welcomed them as they were, messy, imperfect, flawed, beautiful in all the ways life had shaped them. And the softness you gave wasn't weakness, it was courage. It was strength. It was the bravery of someone who knows what it's like to be hurt and still chooses to love in a way that doesn't bruise anyone else. People remember that. They remember the hands that held without breaking, the heart that stayed calm when storms rose, the voice that didn't escalate, the eyes that didn't judge. They remember the nights you stayed up listening when others would have turned away. They remember the ease in your presence, the way nothing felt like a test. The way their soul didn't clench around you, the way their past didn't have to be edited to make you stay. They remember the gentleness you offered as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Even though it was rare enough to feel like a miracle, you were the place where emotional armor wasn't required, where vulnerability wasn't a trap, where honesty didn't cost them connection. You made them feel seen without being exposed, held without being controlled, valued without being used. You gave them a kind of love that didn't remind them of every ache they carried, but instead soothed those aches without demanding a performance of gratitude in return, and because you loved like that, something in them relaxed. Something in them softened. Something in them, long frozen, began to thaw. They had been used to love that stung. Love that came with thorns. Love that made them hyper-aware of every misstep. Love that forced them into patterns of overthinking, overgiving, over-explaining. Love that wasn't love so much as survival in disguise. But you, your presence, your kindness, your quiet reassurance, felt like stepping into sunlight after living too long in the dark. You made them realize that love doesn't have to hurt to feel alive. It doesn't have to tear to feel deep. It doesn't have to leave scars to prove it mattered. They stay close because your love held dignity. Because your love honored the parts of them they thought they had to hide. Because your love didn't take advantage of their fears or their hopes. Because your love didn't manipulate, didn't guilt, didn't gaslight, didn't threaten to leave. You didn't turn affection into leverage. You didn't turn intimacy into performance. You didn't turn connection into currency. You simply loved. Your love healed without declaring itself a cure. It comforted without demanding repayment. It steadied without imprisoning, and so they returned to you, drawn not by dependence but by recognition, recognition of a feeling rare enough to be sacred. They return because nothing else compares to the peace they felt beside you. They return because they understand now, even if they didn't before, that soft love is not fragile, it is transformative. It changes people at their core. It teaches them that they can be held without harm. It rewrites their internal dictionary of what love can look like, feel like, sound like. Maybe you don't even realize how powerful your softness is. Maybe you underestimate the way your compassion shifts the atmosphere. Maybe you don't see how your gentleness creates pathways for others to be braver, kinder, truer to themselves. Maybe you think you were simply doing what anyone would do. But the truth is, not everyone loves the way you do. Not everyone knows how to be gentle without being distant. Not everyone knows how to be present without being overwhelming. Not everyone knows how to give without keeping score. You do. You know the rare art of loving in a way that doesn't leave bruises. You know the quiet power of patience. You know the strength in letting someone bloom at their own pace. You know how to listen without planning your response. You know how to care without crossing boundaries. You know how to bring comfort without assuming control. That is why they stay close, because in a world full of sharp voices and quick tempers, your softness became a refuge. In a world obsessed with power battles and emotional games, your sincerity became a relief. In a world where love is too often confused with chaos, your steadiness became a compass. They stay close because you made them feel safe, not in a temporary, conditional way, but in a soul-deep, life-shifting way. Safe to feel. Safe to speak. Safe to be imperfect. Safe to grow. Safe to hope again. And here's the truth you may not fully acknowledge. You didn't just give them a version of love that didn't wound. You gave them a version of themselves they didn't know they could be. More open. More trusting. More grounded. More alive. You didn't just touch their heart, you taught it something. You didn't just stand beside them, you helped them stand taller. You didn't just love them, you changed the way they believe love can feel. Your softness is not small. It is not simple. It is not something anyone could have given. It is a rare strength wrapped in gentleness, a quiet revolution disguised as kindness. It is the kind of love that doesn't demand loyalty, yet inspires it. Doesn't ask for closeness, yet draws it. Doesn't cling, yet is never forgotten. People stay close to the ones who make their souls unclench. People stay close to the ones who don't turn affection into a battlefield. People stay close to the ones who offer love like a soft landing instead of a trapdoor. People stay close to the ones who remind them that tenderness is real, safe, and possible, and you, without even trying, became that person. They stay close because you made love a place of rest, not a place of injury. They stay close because your presence feels like healing. They stay close because your love carries no harm. They stay close because you became the quiet miracle they didn't know they needed. and now can't imagine losing. They stay close because somewhere along the way, you taught them that connection doesn't have to be a battlefield. You showed them that affection doesn't have to come with conditions or hidden threats. And the more they experienced your presence, the more they realized that what you offered wasn't just kindness, it was liberation. A kind of quiet, steady freedom that gently unravels the knots people didn't even know they were carrying. The kind of freedom that makes the heart say, "This is where I can breathe. This is where I can stay." And what they felt around you wasn't intensity masquerading as love. It wasn't the dizzying high followed by the crushing low. It wasn't the cycles they had become accustomed to, the ones where warmth turns cold without warning, where affection becomes inconsistent, where everything feels like walking on shards of glass. You didn't make them chase you just to prove their value. You didn't make them guess where they stood. You didn't turn connection into a puzzle they had to tirelessly solve. You simply met them where they were, and you offered stability. People cling to that. Not out of weakness, but out of recognition. Out of gratitude. Out of the deep human longing to be understood without pain attached to the understanding. What they found in you was rare, someone whose presence didn't demand self-defense. Someone who didn't judge their sensitivity. Someone who didn't use their vulnerability as leverage. Someone who didn't say, "I care," only to withdraw mercy at the first sign of difficulty. Instead, you gave them something grounding, something that made them feel like they were allowed to be tired, allowed to be hopeful, allowed to be flawed. You became a quiet place where they could finally put down every weapon life had taught them to carry. And that is why they hover close to your orbit. It's not dependence. It's not entitlement. It's not attachment born from insecurity. It's the natural pull of a soul toward the place it felt safest. Your love didn't wound. Your love didn't confuse. Your love didn't punish. Your love simply held, and you don't have to say it out loud for people to feel it. They sense the gentleness in the way you speak. They sense the care in the way you listen. They sense the steadiness in the way you show up without needing applause for it. They sense the sincerity in your intentions. Even the quiet parts of your personality, all the subtle, tender ways you move, have a language of their own. One that says, "You're safe here. You don't have to protect yourself from me." And that message, delivered consistently, not dramatically, not loudly, but genuinely, is what makes people stay, because if we're honest, most people in this world have been hurt by someone they trusted. They've been loved in ways that left scars, small or large, visible or buried. They've been disappointed by promises that collapsed the moment they needed support. They've been made to feel too much, too little, too emotional, too quiet, too passionate, too complicated. They've been taught to brace for impact even during good times. They've been conditioned to expect withdrawal when they reveal their fears. Their past, their truth, but with you, that pattern broke. You loved like someone who understands the weight people carry. You loved like someone who knows what it's like to be mishandled. You loved like someone who decided, consciously or not, to be the kind of tenderness the world lacked. And because of that, people learned to trust again, even if only in small steps at first. They learned to soften in your presence, the way cold hands warm slowly when held gently. Your love became the evidence that healing is possible. They stay close because the space you create feels like the one thing they had stopped believing existed: love without fear. Connection without chaos. Presence without pressure. They stay close because what you gave them wasn't ordinary. It was transformative, and maybe you underestimate yourself. Maybe you think you're just being kind, or just being real, or just being yourself. Maybe you don't see how deeply your warmth reaches someone who has been living in emotional winter for years. Maybe you don't recognize how your steady light looks to someone who has been stumbling through darkness. But the truth is simple: the gentleness you give is powerful, the safety you offer is rare, the softness you embody is unforgettable, and the longer someone knows you, the more they begin to understand the difference between being wanted and being cherished. Between being tolerated and being understood. Between being used and being valued. They stay close because the love you gave didn't wound them, it healed them in places they didn't know still needed healing. They stay close because, over time, they realized something quietly profound: you didn't try to fix them, you simply made space for them to grow. You didn't treat their emotions like problems to solve or inconveniences to endure. You treated them like truths worth hearing, like experiences worth honoring. And that, more than anything, made them feel seen in a way they hadn't felt in years. You never demanded that they hurry their healing. You never asked them to get over it or move on or stop overthinking. You understood that wounds don't disappear just because someone tells them to. You understood that trust doesn't appear just because someone claims to be trustworthy. You understood that hearts don't open on command, they open when they feel genuinely safe, not pushed. So you let them take their time, you let them breathe, you let them unfold at their own pace, and your patience became its own kind of love. The quiet kind. The steady kind. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't pressure, doesn't corner someone into pretending they're okay when they're not. The kind that says, "I'm here." Not to rush you, not to judge you, not to fix you, just to walk beside you. That kind of companionship leaves a mark. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that lingers softly. Like warmth after a long winter, and you might think anyone could have done the same, but the truth is, most people don't. Most people aren't willing to sit with someone in their shadows without trying to control the narrative. Most people aren't willing to let someone be imperfect without taking it personally. Most people aren't willing to love past the surface if it means confronting someone else's pain. But you did. You loved in a way that didn't vanish when things got uncomfortable. You stayed steady when they wavered. You believed in them when they doubted themselves. You saw the parts of them they once hid, and instead of stepping back, you stepped closer, not to pry, but to reassure them that they didn't have to carry everything alone. And that changed them, slowly, quietly, deeply. They found themselves opening up in ways they thought they had forgotten how to. They found themselves revealing stories they had buried. They found themselves trusting you with pieces of their truth, the fragile ones, the raw ones, the ones they usually protect with locks and walls and silence. And you didn't flinch. You didn't run. You didn't use their honesty as ammunition later, you just honored it. That's why they stay close, because you didn't just offer connection, you offered consistency. You didn't just offer affection, you offered understanding. You didn't just offer words, you offered presence. And presence, when it is gentle and genuine, becomes unforgettable. You became the rare place where they didn't have to pretend to be strong when they were exhausted, where they didn't have to hide their doubts, where they didn't have to shrink their personality, where they didn't have to translate their emotions into something neater or safer or easier for someone else to digest. With you, being real didn't feel risky, it felt natural, it felt welcomed, it felt like coming home, and the world doesn't offer many homes like that, not emotional ones, not spiritual ones, not relational ones. So when they found one in you, they held on to it. Not in a way that suffocates, but in a way that cherishes. In a way that recognizes the value of rare things. In a way that understands that when someone loves you softly, purely, without harm, you don't take that for granted. They stay close because you became a quiet anchor in a loud world. You didn't try to own them, you didn't try to impress them, you didn't try to overwhelm them. You simply showed them a version of love that didn't hurt, and that alone was enough to make their heart remember you, even on days when life felt heavy. They stay close because, in the end, love that doesn't wound becomes love that teaches. And the lessons your presence left with them didn't fade, they stayed, quietly shaping the way they now move through life, the way they trust, the way they open, the way they hope. You became living proof that tenderness is not a myth. That consistency is not a fantasy. That love doesn't have to look like chaos to be real. And because of you, they now know that caring for someone doesn't have to involve losing themselves. It can feel like finding a softer version of who they are. The truth is, you didn't even have to stay in their life forever to leave that kind of impact. Even if distance comes, even if life shifts directions, even if paths grow quiet, what you gave them remains. People don't forget where they healed. People don't forget who made their heart feel lighter. People don't forget who showed them that being loved doesn't mean being hurt. And you did that, not through grand gestures, not through perfect words, not through flawless behavior, but through sincerity. Through presence. Through the small, steady ways you showed up when you could have walked away. Through the softness you offered on days they felt difficult to love. Through the calm you brought into their storm without demanding recognition for it, you left fingerprints on their growth, They carry pieces of your gentleness in the way they now speak to themselves. They carry pieces of your patience in the way they handle their fears. They carry pieces of your understanding in the way they now allow themselves to open to others. They carry pieces of your steadiness in the way they show up for the people they love. This is the quiet legacy of soft love. Its influence continues long after the moment has passed. It doesn't fade like intensity. It doesn't shatter like infatuation. It doesn't corrode like attachment built on insecurity. Soft love roots itself into the things that matter: character, belief, trust, hope, and it blooms quietly over time. You showed them that affection can feel safe. You showed them that honesty can feel warm. You showed them that connection can feel peaceful. You showed them that they don't have to apologize for needing gentleness. You showed them that their heart isn't too much. It just needed the right kind of space to breathe. That's why they stay close. Not because they need you to fix them, not because they fear losing you, not because they depend on your presence. They stay close because you are a reminder of what love should feel like: steady, kind, and without harm. You are proof that tenderness can be a force, that compassion can be powerful, that softness can be a home. And even if you don't see yourself as extraordinary, even if you think you simply did what anyone else would, understand this: there are millions of people in this world who have never been loved without fear, who have never been held without judgment, who have never been embraced without conditions. For them, what you offered is not ordinary, it is rare enough to be life-changing. You became a place where their heart could rest. You became a moment of quiet in their loud history. You became the evidence that love doesn't always bruise. You became the softness that stitched something inside them back together. People stay close to that kind of love. People remember that kind of soul. People return to that kind of safety. And maybe you don't realize it, but you gave them more than love. You gave them belief. Belief that they are worthy of gentleness. Belief that connection can be safe. Belief that vulnerability is not a weakness. Belief that their heart can bloom again, even after everything it survived. That is why they hold you close, even in their quietest thoughts. Because loving you, or being loved by you, didn't hurt, it healed.